Well, good evening, everybody, or good morning, whenever you're watching the video. This is for a model analysis here for March 24th, Friday. It's an evening and overnight threat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you some of the model guidance here and what we see visually as meteorologists try to understand why the model's putting things where they're putting them. Some pitfalls you may run into if you're looking at other meteorologists that maybe not on-air meteorologists or National Weather Service meteorologists that are kind of going to talk more about supercell storms. We're kind of at the point where we may see that. It's all about model consistency. There's still possibility we may not see that because there may still be a small cap, a lid on the atmosphere ahead of the main line. So let's get into this. We're going to break it down for you. First thing I want to look at is storm energy, the CAPE. And I talked to some students today out in the shoals, and I said it's buoyancy. And what that means is when you're out in a swimming pool, when you put more air in your lungs, more oxygen, you're going to float. When you blow that air out, you're going to sink. So it's the same with the air. You just feel it all around you. On a humid day, the air floats easier, so when something comes through to lift it, it's going to make that updraft a little bit easier. Now here's case in point on this potential for any supercells out ahead of the main line. The model guidance is picking up on some development out ahead of this around 11 o'clock Friday night. And I mentioned we're looking for consistency. Every model run is going to be a little different. We just want to see the features like this squall line. Where is it going to be on the next model run? What time is it going to have it? How large is it going to be? Is it going to extend farther south? And then we'll look for, does it have more of these cells developing ahead of the main line? The problem with this here is it's developing in an area where the instability is just not ideal for something like this to happen. And I'm going to go through some of the wind guidance here in just a second, and you'll see that it's picking up on some strong mid-level winds coming in from the west, and that's the reason it's putting that in play. Notice the squall line here, and also I've got a more in-depth, zoomed-in view on another YouTube video I just posted as well earlier before this. But notice how everything really dies out CAPE-wise. Again, this red area is that instability, how much the air is going to float. So notice how it dies out quickly behind the main line. So what this model is trying to do is it's trying to keep everything basically feeding along this instability boundary. And it's going to be somewhere in here. So initially we may see a weakening trend with this line. And we still don't know for sure. The model's never 100%. It's usually 50% accurate sometimes. But what we're going to watch over time is the fact that the instability is going to develop farther south as we go through the overnight hours. And again, this is a slight change to the forecast, at least the current forecast we're going with. So we'll have to watch that. So notice how this really increases 3 to 4 in the morning Saturday. So the threat window may be longer than we're expecting here. But again, the threat for severe weather would be over roughly from Huntsville back here over the northwest corner of the state, probably by 2 o'clock in the morning. But as we continue on, the model guidance kind of forms a more solid line of storms here and pushes that towards Gunnersville, Fort Payne, Coleman, down to Birmingham and east. But also notice back to the west, it still has a lot of instability out west. So that's a bit in question right now too as to what's going to happen. So we're going to really have to wait and see on the next model guidance and see what consistency we have based on this. Yeah, we've got a threat of severe weather, but there's not a high confidence of how high that threat's going to be and exactly where the highest threat will be either. Now what I'm looking at here, this is the low-level jet stream. This is roughly around 4,000 to 5,000 feet in the air. What you're going to see plotted in orange, those are the wind speeds at that level. Now sometimes these winds can make it to the ground with big downdrafts. That's why they're important. But also to note here, it shows this big wind max. The very yellow color here, that's a 700 millibar. That's a little bit higher, and it's at about 70 miles per hour. So as you look at the model guidance, that's why this is flaring this up. It says the wind shear is really going to increase in here So it's possible that we could have a thunderstorm on a boundary that's lifting northeast too fast, and it's trying to produce this mesocyclone, but then it gets off the boundary and it stops. Because as you'll see as we go forward here, this really loses the identity here as it goes forward in time. And notice how concentrated the wind is on this boundary. So what I'm going to watch over time, right now it has this boundary kind of here and tracking in this fashion here. But if we start to see, it's possible this line, by the time we get to Friday night, and this storm system's still well out in the Rockies. I think this is the one that came through California and produced a tornado today. So it's been one of those seasons where stuff that happens in California happens here eventually as well. It's possible this line could be all the way down here, which would be more likely, and then have a bigger impact. So just keep that in mind as you look at the model guidance. Don't necessarily take it as face value. But notice the wind's increasing here. And these 70-mile-an-hour winds, the storm speed could be 60 to 70 miles per hour moving northeast, so fairly significant. And that might actually be plotting the 700 millibar winds, if I remember right. But they're both pretty similar. So as we continue on, pretty much the same thing I just showed you. But notice how things kind of relax and the storms begin to feed on this boundary. And as that happens, we see additional storms developing over here. Albertville, Fort Payne, this is where your winds start to increase. And notice the time, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So again, we'll have a lot better idea when the next model set comes out. Meteorologist Eric Burke will be in Thursday morning with that data. And of course, if you're already watching this Thursday morning, I'll be in later this afternoon, and we'll talk more about that. Again, we're at that stage where we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I've seen these things go so many different ways. We just know that when this kind of setup happens, there's a threat for severe weather. We usually don't end up with nothing. But again, we're getting deeper and deeper into March. Later we go into March and early April, our tornado threat really starts to go up. So don't forget to subscribe, click if you've made it this far through this video. By all means, you deserve to click on the subscribe. Again, I'll have another look at the forecast, as I always do, every day at 4, 5, 6, and 10 on WAFF 48.